straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily.
Human remains found in Wyoming believed to be those of Gabby Petito. The latest development in her disappearance as the search for Brian Laundrie continues.
And the prosecutors rest in the federal trial of R. Kelly, where the case has taken us so far and how the defense pushes back as it takes center stage. Plus, a Mennonite Sunday school teacher murdered and a United Airman accused in her death. What you need to know ahead of Mark Gooch's Arizona trial. And later,
find the defendant, Robert Durst, guilty of the crime of first-degree murder of Susan Berman.
The trial is back and the verdict is in. What's next for Robert Durst as a California jury convicts him of murder? Law and Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast.
Welcome everyone to Law and Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmeyer along with Terry Austin. We begin with a story captivating the nation. The remains of a body have been found matching the description of a missing woman, Gabby Petito. This comes as the FBI issues a search warrant at the Florida home of Brian Laundrie, spending much of the day searching the family home. Laundrie's parents were escorted out of the home before returning inside for questioning. Authorities say Gabby's fiance, Brian, went missing last Tuesday. On Friday, Laundrie's parents told the police they hadn't seen him in days. Florida officials then spent the weekend searching for him. Back in July, Laundrie and Petito left for a cross-country road trip. They documented their travels via social media with the hashtag #VanLife. On September 1st, Laundrie returned to his Florida home, driving Petito's van without her. She was reported missing on September 11th. Petito was last seen in late August near Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming. Over the weekend, the remains matching Petito's description were found in that same area. An autopsy is scheduled for Tuesday. A family on vacation captured video of what appears to be Gabby Petito's van late last month in Grand Teton National Park. Law and Crime's Angie Levy shows us the video and what the family says about it.
Jen Bethune says that white van stood out to her and her family because it had Florida license plates, and they're also from Florida. But she didn't realize the significance of the video until a few days ago.
On August 27th, 2021, we got camera footage going through the Grand Tetons Park around 6 to 6:30 p.m.
Jen Bethune narrated this video posted over the weekend to YouTube on the family's Red, White, and Bethune channel. The Bethunes drove through the Spread Creek dispersed camping area. They believe the white van they saw was indeed Gabby Petito's.
We were going to stop and say hi because we're from Florida too, but the van was completely dark. There was nobody there.
FBI agents and park rangers descended upon that camping area over the weekend, an area in Wyoming that's part of the vast Grand Teton National Park. Sadly, on Sunday, the FBI announced a body that matched Gabby's description in the camping area had been found, although a positive identification has yet to be made. The FBI is not commenting on the Bethune family's video. For Law and Crime Daily, I'm Anjanette Levy.
Thanks, Anjanette. Joining us today is criminal defense attorney Julie Rendelman and Terry Austin. Julie, a body has been found. Should the authorities be picking up Brian Laundrie now, or why or why not?
So, look, I think it's a little premature to pick up Brian Laundrie at this point. Again, we don't know some details. We don't know if even though we're waiting for the autopsy to be done, it is possible that there might be signs on the victim's body that indicate a cause of death. And if it does indicate a cause of death, and that points in the direction of Brian Laundrie, then yes, potentially we're looking to get to see him arrested. I think the big problem we all agree on is, where is he? The FBI was not tracking him. He seemed to disappear last Tuesday. There's been absolutely no sign of him. So yes, we have to wait for an autopsy. If the autopsy comes back that she was murdered, then he may be very well the #1 suspect.
Yeah, it's interesting why they weren't watching him this entire time, especially up until this point. Terry, with a body matching the description, why do you think the authorities are hesitating to say it's her?
You know, Brian, they're being very cautious here. I think they know that it's her, but they do want to do that autopsy first to make sure. She's been out there almost 4 weeks. The last telephone conversation was August 25th, and so we know that it's been almost a month. And the stages of decomposition are 4 stages or 5 stages, and at this stage, she's going to be fairly well decomposed, I'm sorry to say, and they may be having a hard time, particularly if there's nothing else at the scene. So they want to wait to make sure with the autopsy.
Makes sense, especially when you think about the timeline as when she was last seen. Thankfully, the family will hopefully have some closure as this autopsy goes underway. Switching gears now to California, as Harvey Weinstein is back in court. On Monday, the film producer pled not guilty to sex-related criminal charges involving 5 women.
Weinstein's latest grand jury indictment charges him with a challenge count of sexual battery by restraint stemming from a May 2010 incident. This marks the 3rd time the prosecution has asked the grand jury to amend the indictment. Back in March, Weinstein was indicted on 11 counts involving 5 women. Weinstein is due back in court on October 25th. The criminal case against the Trump Organization continued this week as former Chief Financial Officer Allen Weisselberg returned to court. Back in July, Weisselberg pled guilty to an indictment against him, alleging he participated in a 15-year tax fraud scheme. Prosecutors claim Weisselberg and the Trump Organization engaged in an off-the-books payment scheme, receiving perks like an apartment, Mercedes-Benz car, and private school tuition for his children, instead of compensation. On Monday, Weisselberg's attorney said, quote, "We have strong reason to believe there could be more indictments coming." Also, on Monday, a judge granted a 120-day adjournment.
A deadly school shooting happened and a Colorado man was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole after that shooting in 2019. On Friday, a judge sentenced 20-year-old Devin Erickson, who is convicted of 46 charges stemming from the shooting. 1 student was killed and 8 more injured after a then 18-year-old Erickson and accomplice Alec McKinney opened fire at their Highlands Ranch High School. McKinney told investigators he planned the attacks for weeks after fellow students made fun of him for being transgender. McKinney, who was 16 at the time of the shooting, was sentenced to life in prison, but has a possibility of parole after 20 years. Erickson, a legal adult at the time, was handed a mandatory life sentence, plus hundreds of years of prison time handed down by the judge.
Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, a Mennonite Sunday school teacher found murdered and a United States airman charged. A look ahead at the trial of Mark Gooch. But first, the federal trial against R&B singer R. Kelly, how the defense is gearing up as the state rests his case.
Hi, this is Dan Abrams with exciting news for all of our Law and Crime followers on YouTube. You can now get the live Law and Crime Network with YouTubeTV for all of your daily live trial coverage, legal news, expert analysis, and original true crime programs. Subscribe to YouTubeTV today and then locate Law and Crime in the channel guide. And for only $1.99 a month, you can add the network to your bundle. Watch Law and Crime every day with YouTubeTV. We put you in the jury box.
Welcome back. After weeks in the federal trial against R. Kelly, the prosecution rests its case on Monday.
Over 20 days in court, the prosecution called 45 witnesses, many detailing abuse from the famed R&B singer. Jurors heard testimony from the former girlfriends, accusers, and former employees, some who were subpoenaed to testify against him. Accusers' testimony ranged from upsetting to disturbing, as some women detailed Kelly's sexual, physical, and psychological abuse. The prosecution alleges Kelly used his employees to recruit women to be used for illegal sexual activities. Kelly's defense fought back, questioning why so many victims waited years to report any abuse. Kelly faces multiple charges at the federal level, including sex trafficking and racketeering. He pled not guilty to all of the charges.
Let's bring back criminal defense attorney Julie Rendelman and Terry Austin. Terry, the prosecution has rested, but do you think there's more they needed to present to prove their case?
I think they did a very good job. They had a very substantial case. I mean, it's been so many days and 45 witnesses, and there's no question that they showed 11 victims of the crime. They had employees who were there. The real question here is, can they establish that RICO charge? And for that, they're going to have to show that Kelly headed up that enterprise and that it was to establish sexual activity with all of these victims. So we'll see if they were able to do that beyond a reasonable doubt.
All right, Julia, let's look at the other side of it now. The defense is expected to put on a case. Is there anything they can say to raise reasonable doubt? And should we expect R. Kelly to testify?
So we never know what's in the minds of the jurors, obviously, but at the end of the day, I think what they're going to be focusing on is trying to break down the witnesses. Can they bring witnesses onto that stand that will question the credibility of the various witnesses that testify? Because if they can, and if they're believable, that raises reasonable doubt. In terms of whether R. Kelly is going to testify, I mean, I think we all saw the Gayle King interview. That was an absolute nightmare. And so no attorney in their right mind is going to want R. Kelly to take the stand. But sometimes defendants have a mind of their own. And at the end of the day, look, time will tell. My expectation is you will never see him on that stand cross-examined by the prosecutor.
Yeah, I would never put him on the stand, and Julie, I'm sure you wouldn't either. But at the end of the day, it is the defendant's right to testify. So I don't know. Anything's possible. I'm hoping maybe we can see a little bit more of that Gayle interview on the stand, but we'll see how it plays out. On to federal court in California in the case against Elizabeth Holmes. A former Theranos employee testified that she quit her job after Holmes rushed the development of blood testing equipment.
On Friday, a former Theranos team manager stated she quit her job in August 2013 after Theranos made a deal with Walgreens that would make the blood testing device available to patients. The witness stated she was, quote, concerned with the way the launch was going and not comfortable with the plan they had in place. Founded in 2003, Holmes claimed the now-defunct Theranos would revolutionize blood testing. Later, investigators found many issues with its programs. The former billionaire faces 12 fraud charges in connection to her time with the company. The trial is set to resume again on Tuesday.
And in Colorado, a trial is now set for a man accused of killing his wife in May 2020. Last week, a judge ruled that the trial of 53-year-old Barry Morphew will begin May 3rd of next year. Morphew's wife, Susan Morphew, went missing on Mother's Day 2020. In a video, Barry Morphew claimed she was kidnapped and begged for her return. Authorities say it was an act and that he actually killed her. In a ruling last week, the judge said the trial could go, quote, either way, meaning it's possible a jury wouldn't convict Morphew of murder. Suzanne Morphew's body has never been found. Barry Morphew faces several charges, including first-degree murder and tampering with a deceased human body. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, Robert Durst found guilty of murder. We explain the conviction of the real estate heir. Plus, a Mennonite Sunday school teacher found murdered in Arizona, and the finger pointed at a United States airman. Everything you need to know ahead of the trial of Mark Gooch. Welcome back to Law and Crime Daily. A United States airman accused of murder after a Mennonite Sunday school teacher is found dead in Arizona. The trial of Mark Gooch is expected to begin on Tuesday of this week. Ahead of that, Law and Crime's Anjan Levy brings us up to speed on the case.
The body of Sasha Kraus has been identified and located.
On January 18, 2020, Sasha Kraus disappeared from her Mennonite community in Farmington, New Mexico. 35 days later, her remains were found in a clearing more than 270 miles away in Flagstaff, Arizona, her hands bound with duct tape. An autopsy showed the 27-year-old Mennonite woman died of blunt force trauma and a gunshot wound to the back of the head. Prosecutors say 21-year-old Mark Gooch drove 7 hours from his Air Force base and killed Kraus because of her faith. And with the help of surveillance video and cell phone records, they claim to have placed Gooch at the scene. Investigators say the Air Force airman was raised Mennonite, but never officially joined the church. As for motive, text messages between Gooch and his brothers showed disdain toward the Mennonite faith. One brother pleaded guilty to hindering the prosecution by taking the suspected murder weapon from Gooch. He was sentenced to 3 years probation. Mark Gooch is charged with first-degree murder and faces life in prison if convicted. For Law and Crime Daily, I'm Anjanette Levy.
Turning now to Ohio, where a jury is now deliberating the fate of Stanley Ford, the man accused of setting a series of deadly fires.
Closing arguments began on Monday after both sides rested their cases last Wednesday. Testimony lasted about 9 days as the defendant elected not to take the stand in his own defense. Ford is accused of setting 3 fires in his neighborhood, and 2 of which resulted in the deaths of 9 people. One group, a young family of 7, where all children were under the age of 15. The jury will be sequestered following the closing statements and will be allowed to deliberate until 8 p.m. Eastern. If Ford is convicted, he could face the death penalty. The penalty phase would begin on September 28th. Another twist and turn in the Murdaugh murder mystery. Just days before a botch-assisted suicide plan, Alec Murdaugh refused the right to take control of his late son's estate. Back in June, mother Maggie and oldest son Paul were found murdered at the Murdaugh family home in South Carolina. At the time, Paul was facing criminal charges stemming from a fatal boating incident from 2019. Last, Alec Murdaugh admitted he arranged for an assisted suicide plot, all in the name of a $10 million insurance policy he hoped could provide for his remaining son, Buster. Police say 61-year-old Curtis Edward Smith shot Murdaugh in the head, though he survived. Smith was later arrested. Murdaugh admitted to the plot and turned himself in last Thursday. He was later released on bond. A California mom behind bars this week after she dragged her 8-year-old daughter 300 feet with her car. Officials say 44-year-old Erin Garcia was drunk and planned to drive away. In an effort to stop her, Garcia's daughter grabbed onto the passenger side door handle. That's when officials say Garcia knowingly drove away. Her daughter was taken to the hospital with minor injuries. Garcia is being held on a $100,000 bond.
When we come back, a guilty verdict years in the making. What a murder conviction means for Robert Durst, and what new charges the real estate heir could soon be facing.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Robert Durst, guilty of the crime of first-degree murder of Susan Berman.
After months of testimony, cross-examination, and back and forth, the verdict is in. A jury finds Robert Durst guilty in the murder of Susan Berman. Durst was convicted of Berman's December 2000 murder. Officials say he shot and killed Berman execution style in her California home. Prosecutors say Durst's motive was that Berman had information about his missing wife, Kathy. They allege he murdered Kathy in New York back in 1982, and that Berman was going to come forward with information on that case. On Friday, he was also found guilty of the special circumstances of killing a potential witness and lying in wait. More than 40 years after Kathy Durst's disappearance, her body has not been found, and Robert Durst has not been charged with that crime. Throughout the California trial, the 78-year-old spent 3 weeks on the stand testifying in his own defense. In just 3 days and only 7.5 hours, the jury reached a guilty verdict. Durst was not present for the reading of the verdict because of a potential exposure to COVID-19. Sentencing is scheduled for October 18th. The Jinx director, Andrew Jarecki, appeared on Good Morning America to weigh in on the role his HBO documentary played in the trial. It was Jarecki's team that captured the infamous bathroom confession in 2015 that set this trial into motion.
Bob admits in the trial that he lied 5 times, perjured himself in this trial. He also admits that he lied in his prior trial in Galveston. So you can't be amazed by it, but at the same time, it's very gratifying because you also know this is a man who's evaded justice for so long that all you can do is hope for the families of the victims that something that they're not going to be surprises.
But Andrew Jarecki wasn't the only documentarian following the trial. Carrie Folas, host of the podcast Jury Duty, the trial of Robert Durst, has been avidly following the case. He gives Law and Crime Daily his thoughts on the verdict.
I was absolutely not surprised by the verdict. I think that the prosecution made an excellent case. They kept in mind who their audience was the entire time. Their audience was not pundits. Their audience was not people like me. Their audience was those 12 jurors.
The family of Durst's missing wife, Kathy, responded to the guilty verdict of Robert Durst late on Friday and are now calling to finally bring justice to her death.
The McCormick family statement alleges that Kathy was murdered on January 31st, 1982, saying in part, quote, "More than ever before, it is clear that she was murdered by Robert Durst and that the evidence is overwhelming." The family went on to say how the justice system of Los Angeles did its job and, quote, "Now it is time for the Westchester, New York District Attorney's Office to do the same for Kathy's murder." The statement pointed out that it was bizarre and unacceptable that Durst was tried for killing an accomplice before he was tried for Kathy's murder. The statement alluded to an investigation by cold case prosecutors that could include charges against Durst. The Westchester District Attorney's Office says the investigation is ongoing and they have no further comment.
Julie, the McCormick family has a point. Durst was convicted of killing a witness to a murder, but not the murder itself. What could this conviction mean for the Westchester DA's case?
So here's the problem, Brian. The first problem is you have a 78-year-old defendant who is medically, without question, very ill. That's the first thing. The second thing, it's very likely he's going to be spending the rest of his life behind bars due to what happened with regards to Susan Berman. That's another factor. And I think one of the biggest factors that we have to think about is when you're making out a case, the laws in New York are a little different than they are in California. And some of the rules in regards to hearsay that we heard time and time again in regards to what happened in this trial may not work in the New York case. And that's something that the DA must consider in order to make sure that they can make out a case and make it out beyond a reasonable doubt.
Well, a lot of moving parts there. We'll see how that plays out. Of course, Terry, what do you expect to happen on October 18th, the day of sentencing for Robert Durst?
Well, Brian, we know that the jury found that there were these special circumstances under California law. They found that this was a murder of a potential witness, and they found that he was lying in wait. What that means is that he will get life without parole under California law. And we know that there is a moratorium in California as far as the death sentence is concerned. So he won't get that unless something changes, and I don't foresee that. So he's facing the rest of his life basically in prison.
Yeah. How long that will be, I don't know. 88 John Lewin said he would outlive us all, so we'll see how that plays out for Robert Durst as his sentencing comes up. Thank you both. And thank you for joining us here at Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.